Hey guys, Jeff here with Encounterbalance. Why do you do the things that you do? What goals do you have for yourself? And even more importantly, why do you have those goals for yourself? If you really look deep down, can you tell what really drives what you want and why? While naming your primary and current goals will likely be easy, it can be difficult to delve deeper into why those goals are so important to you, and the deeper you delve, the more abstract and difficult it might be to characterize what you're feeling. I spend a lot of time thinking about character motivation. I think it's one of the most important, if not the most important factors to portraying a realistic character with depth. While the questions I posed at the start of this video can be interesting to answer in relation to your actual life, that's not what this video is about. I want to talk about my methods for building an effective character motivation. Now when I say effective, I mean something that actually drives behavior and creates narrative conflict. In my opinion, backstory and motivation is only as valuable as the narrative complication it provides. If the motivation doesn't actually change how the character acts during the game, then it doesn't provide much use to the game. There will be some amount of people for whom this style of characterization won't be useful, and it's meant towards a very narrative and roleplay driven game. If what I'm about to describe sounds way over the top for the playstyle of your group, then that's fine. There are many ways to play, but for those of you with similar interests and playstyles to mine, hopefully this proves useful. Fully characterizing motivation can be really complicated, and to be honest, there's a certain amount of instinct and organic development that can go into it, but I think it can still be helpful to try to break it down into actionable steps. I'm going to try to do that here. I've come up with 4 basic steps that I work through with most of my characters, especially long-running campaign characters, to try to really understand their motivations. And while there are many more levels of depth and complexity that go into a fully realized character, I found that these steps give a good baseline for a deep and realistic character with a strong motivation. Now, while I think having all completed steps is best for any given character, I don't always have all the steps completed right from session 1. Sometimes it can be useful to live a session or even a few in the character's skin to get a feel for how they actually play before committing to some deep existential goal of theirs. But after a few sessions in, I like to have most, if not all of these done. Step 1. A central, specific goal. Step 1 is the easy part, and it's something most people do already. This is what your character wants in the most simple and direct way. This should be something concrete, specific, and actionable. Something like, I want to get revenge against this specific enemy for my lost family. I want to earn enough money for my spouse and children to live comfortably and safely. I want to become the greatest warrior in this region. The more specific it is, the better. The steps to achieve it and the potential stumbling blocks should be more or less obvious at a glance. This gives you something specific to anchor your character to, and gives the GM something specific to be able to tie into the world and game to push and challenge your character. Step 2. An opposing goal. For every goal we also have a reason why we haven't accomplished it yet. It's easy to make excuses and justify it away, but deep down, we always know that it's mostly our fault. I'm sure we've all had days where we wanted to be productive and finish a project we have, but instead spent the day watching TV. This is what I like to call an opposing motivation. Our motivation to complete our project is opposed by our motivation to finally relax for a day in our life and get away from the stress. For every drive we have, some part of us wants the opposite, and by tapping into that opposite, we can bring more conflict into our character, and where there's more conflict, there's more drama. I'll give an example. Say our main drive is one of the examples I used earlier. I want to be the greatest warrior in these lands. It's easy to say and even truly believe you want, but it's not quite that easy. Here are some examples of setbacks or opposing motivations that could explain why this motivation is worthy of using in the narrative. I want to be the greatest warrior in these lands, but I also want to be a good spouse and parent to my family. Each hour I spend training and fighting is another hour my family doesn't see me. But each hour spent with them is time not spent on becoming the best. Immediately by adding this opposing motivation, we have a ton of narrative threads to pull on. For one, the stakes are raised, where if maximal ability was the only goal, the character might be willing to take fights at bad odds, knowing the experience and practice could push them to new heights. But with this second and opposing motivation, their death in pursuit of this first goal now leaves their family to suffer without them. Additionally, it adds drama to literally every choice the character makes. Every step towards one goal is a step away from the other. Our character wants both, but only one is possible. Every choice in the story will fuel one or the other, By focusing in on the opposing and conflicting motivations that every human experiences, the push and pull of our different desires, we guarantee that our character will always have drama and stakes to their story. Even moments of peace in the greater narrative will be clouded by being torn in two by desire, and that conflict is essential to good story. But to really understand where this all leads, we'll have to look a little bit deeper. Step 3. The base need. Now it's time to get introspective. This character example we've been using so far, we're starting to get a good image of them and what they're aiming for. But in order to really be able to portray this to the best level, we'll need to dive a step further into what I like to call base need. We know what our character wants, but we don't really have an idea of why they want it. I think that essentially everything we do as humans can tie into our base need. It drives everything we do, and even if we're not consciously aware of it, all of our actions drive, or at least attempt to drive, us towards this need. This can be a bit difficult to pin down sometimes, but I'll give a few examples of base need and how they might each look and tie into our character so far. The base needs I see most commonly are security and survival, the desire to have food, water, money, needs, etc. covered now and into the future. Power and control, having an influence and effect on the world at large, being able to make effective and meaningful choices. Love, this one is pretty obvious. And happiness, having a purpose that brings contentment, if not joy, with life. There may be more, and every person will probably hold some element of each category as important, but more likely than not, it's one of these needs that is king, that all other needs are in service to. Almost every central and opposing motivation can be matched with all of the base needs in the right situation, so it's mostly just a matter of looking deep into our character, or even making a conscious choice of which makes the most sense. For example, our primary motivation of wanting to be the greatest warrior in the region. Let's find a reason why this is so important to us. If our base need is survival, then we could see that fame and wealth that would come with being the greatest would guarantee a base quality of life. We would always be sought after for work, the high price we could demand would ensure that we could always lead a comfortable life, and always have our basics covered going into the future. However, if our base need is power, then perhaps we'd like to use our sought-after combat ability to fight for our political side and bring it to power, or become an advisor and influencer, or merely even want to use our combat ability as a means of dominance and control over other warriors. We can find tie-ins for becoming the best just as easily for love as our base need, and happiness as well. Most motivations will work with any base need, but that base need colors our perceptions of why our motivation drives us, and alternate motivations that fulfill the same base need may become more important as they become more viable than our primary motivation. Our opposing motivation will nearly always factor into the same base need as our primary one, which is why they all compete for our attention. The same deep-down desire can be met in multiple ways, and deciding which way is most likely to work to the greatest effect can be really interesting. Perhaps our family motivation would be much more likely to be successful at providing us security, but great fame would provide greater security, even if it's less likely to be achieved, which will be sacrificed in the end. Or perhaps there's even a way to do both. By understanding what our characters really want deep down, we can color their choices with more depth, and it makes it easier to process how setbacks and greater story might change and influence their motivations at a higher level, and how they might respond to positive and negative influence. Optional. Step 4. Relationship to your real-life motivations. So this one isn't as crucial for building a complex character, but it's something that I think can be really powerful for actually portraying them, especially if you're an emotionally driven player, or if you want a really vivid role-playing experience. And that's to relate your character's motivations, conflicts, and goals to your own personality and life experience. To find through lines between you and them, to understand that while you may have different morals and specific goals, that there's common ground between you. For example, our character's motivation to be the greatest warrior is very similar to my own desire to become a better content creator and artist. Their motivation to be better for their family is similar to my own conflict with how my time is spent in art and content takes away from my time with friends and family. By understanding and emphasizing that common ground, you can grow closer to them and more vividly portray them in the game itself. This might be overkill for some players, and that's totally fine, but personally I found it's made me a better player and even a more self-aware person. So there you have it, my steps for a truly rounded out and deep character motivation. So just to recap, Step 1, a central and specific goal, what we want at the most basic level. Step 2, an opposing motivation, something that conflicts against our primary motivation to give a conflict and drama to our character. Step 3, the base need, what they really want at the deepest point in their being, and how that might drive their behavior. And an optional step 4, to tie that in with your own life to build a better bond between you and your character and a more vivid portrayal. Now you may ask, well, okay, but that sounds like a lot to work through, so why does this matter? Does this really make the game any more fun? And honestly, that's something you'll have to experiment with on your own and decide for yourself. For some gaming styles and groups, this whole thing may be way overkill. But for the sorts of games I find myself wanting to play in and run, I found it's made my characters so much more vivid and rich, not to mention way more satisfying to play, and dare I say, better to have in games. It adds conflict and color to the character in a way that guarantees the character will always have some drama to work with, even if the story overall isn't directly driving them, and in moments of stress, it'll really add to the stakes and drama of the moment because you'll have such a clearer picture of why you're even there in the first place. If you at all enjoy character portrayal and narrative and roleplay focused gaming, give it a try sometime and let me know how you like it. I'm always happy to talk these sorts of things over. It's one of my favorite parts about building and playing a character, so hopefully you found it useful or at the very least interesting. I'm planning on making a video exploring these 4 steps with one of my own characters that I'm playing, going in depth with all of the steps and talking about them and how they've worked in the game. I'd also be happy to address any comments, concerns, or questions about all this in there as well, so leave a comment if there's something you'd like to see me touch on. Thanks so much for watching. I'm going to really try to make videos, especially more deep dive character building videos like this, a regular thing on this channel going forwards, so if there's any topics you'd like to hear me talk about, please let me know, and consider subscribing and sharing if you think that it could help someone. Take care.